Hello and welcome to Wavescan, the international DX program from Adventist World Radio. Researched and written in Indianapolis by Dr. Adrian Peterson and produced in the studios of WRMI Shortwave in Okeechobee, Florida. I'm Jeff White. Today on Wavescan, the story of the good ship Radio Scotland, our ancient DX report for 1909, our monthly DX report from Japan, and our special QSL of the week. Well, the story of the good ship Radio Scotland begins back in the year 1904. That was the year in which the John Brown shipyards on the Clyde in Scotland built the 90-foot-long, 500-ton motorless barge LV Comet. With the rest of the story, here's Ray Robinson.
Thanks, Jeff. The Comet was constructed under contract to the Commissioner of Irish Lights in Éire for service as a lightship in Dublin Bay. At the end of some 60 years of service at anchorage as a lightship near the city of Dublin, the Comet was decommissioned and towed to St. Peter Port on the island of Guernsey in the Channel Islands. Here it was, now under the ownership of entrepreneur Tommy Shields, that the ship was fitted out as a mobile radio station, with studio, transmitters and additional electronic equipment. The studio was prefabricated at the RCA facility at Sunbury-on-Thames, and two RCA Ampliphase transmitters, model BTA-10 at 10 kilowatts, were shipped from the United States. All the radio equipment was assembled in a warehouse on Guernsey and readied for installation into the ship. A mobile crane was used to lower the pre-assembled equipment into the Comet. The studio was installed in what had previously been the captain's cabin when the ship was operating in Irish waters. A 30-kilowatt Deutz power generator was installed, and an aluminium mast 200-foot tall was attached to the stub of the previous wooden mast. One of the main problems associated with the mobile crane and its task of transferring the heavy equipment from the dock into the ship was that the tidal movement at this location at the island of Guernsey varies as much as 30 feet each day. The Comet, still as a motorless barge, was towed from Guernsey up into Scottish waters via the east coast of England. On the way, the tow rope broke, and it took 2 days to reattach the rope. The new stationary location for the Comet was 3.5 miles off the Scottish coast near Dunbar, approximately 25 miles from Edinburgh. The target date for the initial broadcast from the Comet, under the identification slogan Radio Scotland, was scheduled for the last day in December 1965. This advertised time was barely achieved, only just 10 minutes before midnight, though this inaugural broadcast was on the air at reduced power.
On 242 meters in the medium wave band, this is Radio Scotland.
Good evening. This is a proud moment for me, and indeed for all of us here, for after many months of trial and tribulation, Radio Scotland is now a floating reality. Thanks to the skill and ingenuity of a dedicated band of radio engineers and the loyalty of our team, we have been able to convert a former Clyde-built lightship, the Comet, into one of the most modern offshore broadcasting stations in the world. Now, our aims are simple and straightforward: to provide a new exciting form of entertainment radio and to offer advertisers a new, simple and economic medium in which to sell to millions of homes in Scotland and in Northern England.
And for you on Radio Scotland calling you. Turn the dial to Radio Scotland station in on 342. Who has all the latest records? Radio Scotland leads the way for the best in entertainment. Stay with 242 all day. And for you on Radio Scotland calling you. Turn the dial to Radio Scotland station in on 242. Don't you miss your favorite program? Doesn't matter where you are, in the home or in the factory. Radio Scotland's never far. And for you on Radio Scotland calling you. Turn the dial to Radio Scotland station in on 242.
And it's
Greetings, hookter, chooker friends and sing-alongs, bucks and bends, grannies and crannies, and you yankers and euchre, not to mention the pert-heed polis, and welcome to McLaughlin's Hookter, Choochter, Keely, when once again we invite you to struggle your wally knees, rattle your bunions, bounce in your torty champers, and more or less lift off your kilts and have fun. And first of all, Bella, grab your granny, pull on your gutties, struggle your wellies, and dance to the sound of Fraser McGlynn and the Nightsome Reel.
The inaugural broadcast was heard at good level in nearby Edinburgh and across the open waters in Scandinavia, though the signal into Glasgow and the west of Scotland was quite poor. The signal into all of the mainland areas was improved significantly a couple of weeks later, on January the 16th, when a special part from the United States was installed, thus enabling full power operation. The initial medium wave channel was 1241 kHz, though this was modified to 1259 kHz after the specialized American part was installed in 1966. Though there were two medium wave transmitters at 10 kilowatts each on board the Comets, and a locally made combining unit had been installed, yet usually only one transmitter was on the air at any one time. On February the 10th, still in the same year, 1966, the radio ship Comet was flooded during a storm. A Coast Guard ship came to the rescue with a bilge pump that removed this undesired intrusion. As with so many of the pirate radio ships around the British Isles and associated areas back then, Radio Scotland aboard the LV Comet underwent its share of troubles. Due to a poor signal in the more heavily populated areas of Glasgow, arrangements were made for the motorless ship to be towed to the western side of Scotland. Again, this motorless ship was towed for the 1,000-mile voyage around the northern coast of Scotland, from its stationary location off the east coast of Scotland, the Edinburgh side, to a new location off the west coast of Scotland, the Glasgow side. This voyage took a few weeks, and initially they were on the air as they travelled. However, due to the difficulty in replenishing the slowly travelling mini-convoy, radio transmissions were discontinued halfway through the journey. When they arrived at their new anchorage off the coast of Troon, Radio Scotland returned to the air, and a survey showed that almost half of the total population of Scotland listened to the pirate programming from the good ship Comet. However, due to a misunderstanding as to the boundary between the legal coastal waters of Scotland and the open seas, Radio Scotland was taken to court and fined for illegal broadcasting from Scottish waters. So, again the Comet was towed to a new location, this time off the coast of Northern Ireland near Ballywater. On April the 9th, 1967, the station returned to the air as Radio Scotland and Ireland, though briefly at one stage the identification announcement stated Radio 242. That didn't work financially, so again the ship was towed to another location, this time a more than 1,000-mile voyage back to its original location at Dunbar off the east coast of Scotland for improved coverage of Edinburgh and its surroundings, and that was in May of the same year, 1967. However, the end was on the horizon, and advertising revenues did not cover expenses. Thus, the final epic broadcast of the very popular Radio Scotland ended in the evening of Monday, August the 14th, 1967. The ship was then towed to Dunbar on the coast and offered for sale. But when a sale did not materialise, the ship was towed to Methill Harbour in Fife, and all of the electronic equipment was removed. The Comet was then towed to Holland, where it was used for a while as a houseboat, and then 2 years later, in 1969, it was taken to Auerkirk and broken up. In addition to its shipboard facility, Radio Scotland also maintained an office in Scotland on Cranworth Street, just off Byres Road in West Glasgow. At one stage, an advertising office was in use in Royalty House on Dean Street in London. At the end, listeners by the thousand signed a petition to save Radio Scotland with a request to grant a legal licence for a land-based station. The petition, with 2.5 million signatures, was presented to the government licensing agency in London, but the request was denied. A few short years later, entrepreneur Tommy Shields was hospitalised with a kidney problem from which he never recovered. He died at the young age of 49 with his lifelong dream unrealised.
Thanks very much, Ray Robinson of KVOH.
You're listening to Wavescan from Adventist World Radio. Send your comments and reception reports to Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46229 in the United States. That's Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46229 in the USA. Or you can email us at wavescan@awr.org. Our email once again, wavescan@awr.org.
And thank you, Alan Graham. We begin our Ancient DX report for the year 1909 with wireless reports about several shipping disasters in various parts of the world. The most notable shipping disaster in association with the usage of the CQD distress signal took place early in the year 1909, on January 24th, when the Italian liner Florida struck the White Star liner Republic out in the Atlantic off the American East Coast near the Nantucket Lightship. Jack Binns was the wireless operator at station MKC aboard the stricken Republic, and over the course of time he transmitted some 200 emergency messages in Morse code. 2 other ships came to the scene of this maritime accident, another White Star liner, the Baltic, and a revenue cutter, the Gresham. A total of 1,500 people were successfully transferred, with the loss of only 6 people in the collision itself. The Baltic sank at sea, and the Florida limped into port at New York. On June 10th, the Cunard liner Slavonia, call sign MVA, became stranded near the Azores Islands off the edge of Africa when she struck the rocks off Flores Island. 2 German ships, the Princess Irene and the Batavia, heeded the call and rescued all 597 people off the Slavonia before she sank. Some of the wreckage of the Slavonia is still visible to this day at the islet Lower Rasa. It is reported that the first double usage of the distress signals, both CQD and SOS, was sent by the American ship Arapaho in August 1909 when it lost its propeller near Diamond Shoals off the American Atlantic coast. 2 other ships lost a propeller during this year 1909, and aid was summoned by Morse code telegraphy. These ships were the City of Racine, call sign JC, out from Chicago on Lake Michigan, and the Georgia GC, also on Lake Michigan. The coastal steamer Ohio struck a submerged rock off the coast of Alaska on August 9th, and operator George Eccles at the ship transmitter AO continued sending out a Morse call for help even as the ship was sinking. Eccles lost his life, though 2 nearby ships came to the rescue and picked up the nearly 200 passengers and crew. Down in the South Pacific, the Norwegian freight and passenger steamer Ocean Queen was on the voyage from Tahiti to the small phosphate mining island of Makatea. As the ship was entering the bay at Makatea, the engines broke down and the ship was driven onto the coral reef. The passenger liner Mariposa HK heard the emergency call and took off all personnel before the Ocean Queen slid off the reef and sank. During the early part of the year 1909, explorer Robert Peary led an expedition to visit the North Pole. On the return journey back to the United States, his ship called in to Indian Harbor in Labrador, Canada. He had a message sent to the newspaper New York Times from the Marconi wireless station NR at Indian Harbor, stating, "I have found the pole." He claimed to have located the North Pole earlier on April 6th. In Denmark, Einar Dessau communicated with a government wireless station 6 miles distant on March 18th, and in England, the PMG department took over all of the Marconi wireless stations on September 29th. In Australia, there were just 2 active licensees on the air, Mr. L.C. Jones in suburban Adelaide and Mr. C.P. Bartholomew in suburban Sydney. In New Zealand, the government complained that local amateur wireless operators were interfering with shipping communications. In the United States, the Junior Wireless Club was formed in New York on January 2nd. Many more wireless clubs were formed throughout the country during the year, though this New York club, which later widened its activities as the Radio Club of America, claims to be the very first in the world. In 1909, the famous maritime wireless station PH moved its operations from Russian Hill in South San Francisco to Hillcrest, which became known as Radio Ridge. During the transfer, station CH in the Chronicle building filled in and operated the maritime service. In February, Dr. Lee DeForest installed his new ArcPhone radio transmitter in the terminal building and a receiver in the Metropolitan Life building, both in New York City. His mother-in-law, Harriet Stanton Blatch, made a broadcast promoting women's rights, which was heard by an audience of senior students from 2 nearby schools. In April, the now famous Doc Harold began a regular broadcasting service over his Spark wireless station in San Jose, California. This station was located at his College of Engineering and Wireless in the Garden City Bank building on 1st and West San Fernando Streets, and the antenna system consisted of more than 2 miles of bronze wire stretched out over 4 city buildings. The 15-watt transmitter with a microphone and a battery operated on long wave at 40 kilohertz. On June 21st, William Dublier made a public demonstration of radio broadcasting at the Alaska-Yukon Pacific Exposition in Seattle, Washington, in which he transmitted both music and speech. He was the first to use small sheets of mica to provide a stable capacitance in the radio transmitter. We should also mention that the Great White Fleet, the American Naval Flotilla, made further radio broadcasts in January and February in the Mediterranean and into the Atlantic. By the end of the year 1909, there were close to 1,000 wireless stations on the air in 70 countries throughout the world, on land and on ship. Amateur wireless operators were on the air in many different countries, including the world's #1 radio amateur, Don Wallace, in Los Angeles. Let's go to Tokyo now. Here's Yukiko Tsuji with her DX report for this month.
Hello and welcome to the DX Report of the Month from Japan Shortwave Club, edited by Toshi Otake, and I'm Yukiko Tsuji. We have several DX reports from our club members this week. Swab Saramuzu via Tamsui, Taiwan, was heard on 11570 kHz on November 8th from 1130 to 1200 UTC in Mon. SIO rating was 353. Talk program was aired. One Talk Radio Light from Papua New Guinea was heard on 7325 kHz on October 29th from 0949 to 0959 UTC in English. SIO rating was 342. Discussion by a male and female announcers was broadcast. KTWR from Guam was received on 9975 kHz on November 2nd from 1215 to 1245 UTC in Japanese. The signal was strong and the SIO rating was 454. This was a friendship radio program, a new Japanese language program aired every Sunday. This program has been transmitted on a contract of 6 months and will be extended if listeners' responses are favorable. According to Friendship Radio website, this transmission cost 5 times more than the DRM transmission, which they tested at the same station previously. Bhutan Broadcasting Service was received on 6035 kHz on November 7th from 1120 to 1200 UTC in English. SIO rating was 343, then down to 332. News, talk program, and local pop music were heard. Helliniki Radiophonia from Greece was heard on 9420 kHz on November 6th from 2030 to 2110 UTC in Greek. SIO rating was 353. News report was broadcast. The parallel frequency 9935 kHz was SIO rating 252. Voice of Turkey was heard on 9610 kHz on November 1st from 2130 to 2200 UTC in English. SIO rating was 444. News, review of the Turkish press, and the DX corner were on the air. Radio Romania International was heard on 9620 kHz on October 29th from 2258 with interval signal to 2320 UTC in English. SIO rating was 353. Radio Newsreel and Science Today were aired. The parallel frequency 7395 kHz was in better reception condition of SIO rating 454. Deutsche Welle via Kigali, Rwanda was received on 17800 kHz on November 8th from 0627 with interval signal to 0730 UTC. SIO rating was 353. The program was in Hausa until 0700, then English program with News and World Link started. The Overcomer Ministry via Okeechobee, USA was heard on 9955 kHz on November 3rd from 2220 to 2235 UTC in English. SIO rating was 353. Preach program was aired. Radio Havana, Cuba was heard on 11760 kHz on November 8th from 2215 to 2230 UTC in Spanish. SIO rating was 343. Correspondent report was broadcast. Finally, Japan Shortwave Club will issue the QSL cards for the correct reports on our segment of WaveScan program. We are issuing QSL card by email to the report sent by email. Our address for your email report is jswcqsl@live.jp. I repeat, jswcqsl@live.jp. We continue to issue the printed QSL card by the same system as before. Your report should be addressed to JSWC PO Box 44, Kamakura, which is KAMAKURA, postal code 248-8691, Japan. $1 ILC or $2 for return postage will be appreciated. For this edition of DX Report, we would like to thank Mr. Iwao Nagatani, Mr. Yasuharu Tanabe, Mr. Eiji Asaoka, Mr. Mitsunori Kawazoe, Mr. Chiaki Shimada, and Mr. Hiroyuki Akiba for sharing the information with us. Thank you for listening, and please join us for our next edition of DX Report of Japan Shortwave Club. I am Yukiko Tsuji in Tokyo.
Thank you, Yukiko. Now we have news about the closing of a U.S. shortwave station. From Wolfgang Buschel's BCDX bulletin in Germany, KJES is gone on shortwave. I just received an email from Tom Beaton, a member of the Boston area DX group, says John Fisher in North Chelmsford, Massachusetts. He says he received a QSL for a report he sent to KJES last summer. KJES, by the way, is in New Mexico. A note on the QSL said they were no longer broadcasting on shortwave, just on the web. I went to their website, and sure enough, they are off. They say that with the shortage of trained people to keep the transmitter going and the advent of the new technology, they're now broadcasting via the web. From their website, it mentions that KJES started as a shortwave radio station back in 1992, and we broadcast the Word of God for 22 years using shortwave. With the advent of new technologies and the increased shortage of skilled engineers needed to keep us up and running, we've now switched over to web streaming. You can now listen to our recordings of scripture and praise music online. KJES Shortwave Radio is at the Lord's Ranch in New Mexico. Now our special QSL of the week, which features The Long Wait. In fact, another long wait extending over a period of 23 years from the time of the original reception to the arrival of the envelope containing the verifications. Jerome Berg in suburban Boston, the author of the 4 authoritative volumes containing the entire history of shortwave broadcasting and listening, tells how he ultimately received a QSL from another regional shortwave station in Russia. In 1979, Jerry Berg heard the programming from a regional shortwave station located at Petrozavodsk in the extreme western edge of European Russia. At that time, he recorded his reception with the use of an old reel-to-reel tape recorder. It so happened that he was going through some of these old recordings a dozen years ago, and he came across the old recording of his reception of the station in Petrozavodsk. He copied the recorded programming onto a CD and posted it off to the station, together with a letter of explanation and a prepared do-it-yourself QSL card in the Russian language. A month later, he received a friendly letter in English from the officer at the Petrozavodsk radio station, together with the prepared QSL card duly signed and rubber stamped. A second long wait of 23 years. And we end today's Wavescan with some symphonic orchestra music of the Karelian State Philharmonic Society in Petrozavodsk. Thanks for listening to Wavescan, the international DX program from Adventist World Radio, researched and written in Indianapolis by Adrian Peterson. Next week on Wavescan, a Christmas feature, Christmas Island Adventures, and our Philippine DX report. Several QSL cards are available for your reports on Wavescan. Send your AWR and KSDA reception reports for Wavescan to the AWR address in Indianapolis and also to the station your radio is tuned to, which may be KVOH or WWCR or WRMI, or to the AWR relay stations that carry Wavescan. Remember, too, you can send a reception report to the DX reporters when their segment is on the air here in Wavescan. They will verify with a colorful QSL card. Return postage and an address label are always appreciated. Our Wavescan address is Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46229, USA. That's Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46229, USA. You can email us at wavescan@awr.org. That's wavescan@awr.org. I'm Jeff White at WRMI in Okeechobee. Until next week, good listening, everyone.